today. I've got to tell you that we are going to be live streamed. So please be aware of that. And perhaps one of the useful tips is that when you're not speaking, could you mute your mic? Second thing is, in terms of meeting protocol, I want to take questions from everyone. And my suggestion is that you either type your question, stroke raise your hand by just typing the chat box you wish to speak, and I will do my best to make sure that everybody gets a fair crack of the whip with this. I don't know if I can't see that there's anybody in on phones today, which is great. It makes it much easier for me to be able to manage people to come in on that.
Chair?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, last time when I tried to go on to the chat, I got disconnected. So I don't know whether it's okay or just to raise our hand to ask the question.
The trouble is that I can now see you, Manisha. You've now flashed up. Why don't we all just try and type something in the chat right now just to see if we can work it and who it works for and who it doesn't?
Okay.
Yeah. So, Paul, can you hear me, Paul? It's Neil.
Yeah. I will take that point in a moment, Neil.
Okay. Yeah.
It's on the top of my list.
Great. I knew it would be.
So Andrew's done it. Barry, Ashley, thank you. Ashley Martin, thank you. Martin Mitchell, that is. Lucy, yeah. So it looks like, Manisha, you're going to have to cough, and I'll have to recognise it.
Yeah, I've tried, but it's still not letting me to do it.
Okay, no worries. It's not.
Yeah.
I'll just listen out for the for a noise and know that it's you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. So we're going on to sort of brief introduction to the meeting. On today's agenda, we have a number of different items. The key thing is that item 4 and item 10 are presentations. However, in order to facilitate, particularly as we thought we might have people on the phones dialing in today, the presentations have been sent out in advance of the meeting. So that's for 4 and 10. So that's just to help, but the presentations will be on the screen during their presentations. Item 5 and all the minutes were sent out over a week ago. You will also have received additional information from the team this week. So some of the information, which Neil, you point out that there were 2, I think, item 5s. There are not. The other item 5 is actually from the Rail North Committee, RNC, where I saw there was a couple of papers there that I felt should be circulated just to give people background. One was on Blake Jones, and the other one was on, it was also on a COVID update. It was just to give you some more background and to keep you informed of other things that are going on within the Transport for the North at the moment. So that was the purpose of sending those out. It was hopefully not to create confusion. You also have the slides that we discussed at the last consultation meeting, so you also have those today. If everything is okay, I will proceed with the meeting, and perhaps everybody can could everybody just type something into the meeting chat to make sure that you're okay with everything that I've said so far. Okay, that's looking okay. So, first of all, I said welcome. I'd like to just ask if there are any declarations of interest at all. I'm not seeing anything, Gary, so that's looking clear. So I'd like to now consider and approve the minutes held on the 13th of February 2020. I appreciate we've had a meeting since then. However, the last meeting was a consultation meeting, and the minutes of that particular meeting will be considered at item 9. So could I have a proposer for the minutes, please? I'll take that, John, as a proposal. Thank you. And the seconder, please. Okay, could I have a seconder for to approve the minutes, please? Thank you, Andrew.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. We're there. Thank you. So now
Chair, Paul, can I point out that in the membership list, which actually comes before the minutes in the agenda, we seem to have 2 vice chairs currently.
That is. Thank you very much. Who asked the question? Sorry, who asked the question?
I'm sorry, this is Neil.
All right, Neil. Okay. Yeah, Neil, there are 2 vice chairs, and that's a requirement, I believe, of the structure of this scrutiny committee. But perhaps, Deborah, if you're there, you could just clarify that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The requirement is to have a majority party and a vice chair from the second largest party, so there are 2 vice chairs of the scrutiny committee.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Deborah.
Okay, thank you very much then. I would like to, I believe it's Barry that's presenting or starting the presentation on the coronavirus update. If you would be so good as to do that, then that would be great. Thank you.
So, good morning. I was going to listen 2 parts with asking Sal Patel to cover the rail element, and then I'll cover the other 3 elements on the aspects of coronavirus. So, Sal, are you on the call?
Morning, everyone. Thanks a lot, Barry, for handing over. I want to make a start, firstly, by setting the context behind the response that TFN has coordinated around coronavirus and the impact on rail. And then, given the situation is so fluid and so much information has come out this week, I want to provide you a bit more of a current update. This presentation was produced in advance of a lot of the guidance that's been produced, so there'll be 2 parts to this presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you. Ever since this happened and we moved to this new situation, Rail North Partnership and the industries worked very, very closely together immediately on lockdown, and all of the franchise operators, Northern were already on our lab, but all the other franchise operators have now been moved on to what's known as emergency measures agreements, so basically management agreements now run centrally by the Department for Transport. That doesn't mean the owning groups don't play a part, they're still there, but the risk is now taken, financial risk is now taken on by the Department for Transport instead. Through this, we've also, through TFN, we've come out and coordinated a group called the Northern Contingency Group, and I'll go through that a little bit more on the next slide. What the operators have put in place since the 23rd and the 24th of March, emergency key worker timetables, and those were adjusted really to meet the needs of the people that need to go to places like hospitals and key workers that really need to use rail. The guidance is absolutely use public transport as a last resort. As TFN, we've also set up a buddying system as well within the strategic rail team, and that is assigning separate members of the team to work with separate local authority lead officers as well, and it really ensures that we've got a consistent flow of information flowing through, and it also provides a single point of contact as well. And also TFN is really working to reinforce the stay-at-home message. We know that has now changed to stay alert, but our overriding message is we should be using public transport as little as possible. Overall, we're probably seeing that we've got about 45% of services running at the moment right now, and we're only really seeing about 5% of passengers travelling at the moment. Next slide, please. This map really shows a bit more detail behind what it is the Northern Marine Contingency Group is doing. So TFN set this up and it chairs it, and it's really working very, very well. And it's a really useful mechanism really to connect everyone and keep the industry response reflective of demands. The industry is saying that they really appreciate the opportunity it brings. It's about an hour every single week. It brings all the local authorities together, and it brings the operators and Network Rail together, and it really provides a really good forum to bring out any key issues that the operators can take away, and also allows the regions to contribute any things that they've observed inside their areas as well. South Yorkshire, for example, provide a really good example of how services could be amended to meet their key worker timetable, and Northern were really able to respond to that very, very quickly as well. I think this really shows that the devolution agenda is really working really well as well, and the initiative is really won praise from Whitehall. There's nothing like this going on across the country at the moment right now, and it really provides an opportunity to share information effectively and consistently. Next slide, please. These graphs that you'll see in the next few slides are slides you might be very familiar with already. So this shows you station usage is used by number 10's briefings as well, and we can see on that the usage has gone down massively. I mean, I already talked about usage is probably around about 5% of what we would normally expect pre-COVID, and this graph really demonstrates that their Network Rail's major stations. Next slides, please. Next steps, which I should caution that this was written before a lot of the guidance came out, but Network Rail and the operators are currently planning on a phased restoration of services at the moment right now, and that restoration of services is due to happen on the 18th of May, and I'll talk a bit more about that inside the current update that I'm going to be providing next. As always, we will be, as an industry, guided by the government and the PHE guidance that comes out on safety and social distancing measures, and we're working very, very closely at the moment right now with the Rail Delivery Group. There is a consequential impact at the moment right now on rolling stock and driver training. As a result of the social distancing, all driver training for new rolling stock is having to be suspended at the moment right now, because it's very difficult to do with under the social distancing guidelines. And we're also finding bottlenecks inside factories like CAF and Hitachi at the moment right now, who are not currently producing any new trains. So there is a delay at the moment right now in the approval of any new trains coming into both Northern and TPE. We're seeing a loss of revenue, obviously, and a massive financial consequence at the moment right now, which is being borne by the DFT, and clearly that won't be sustainable in the future. That's something that we are looking at the moment right now. I think at the same time there are opportunities for the North to really shape what the recovery will look like, and I think Barry will go through that inside his agenda item. We had our Rail North Committee meeting on Tuesday, and they similarly were considering the same issues that we are talking about today. I'm just going to move on next, just to a bit of a current issue at the moment right now. This is basically based on the fact that we've received a lot of guidance since Monday. I've just tried to digest some of that information into a few bullet points. Unfortunately, that won't be on the slides, and I'll just do that as a verbal update. So as I said already, about 40 to 50% of services are currently working under a key worker timetable at the moment right now. And the message currently remains that we don't travel unless that journey is essential. The operators are currently preparing their next step towards a restoration of services, and that step up is up to about 65 to 75% of the pre-COVID levels from 18th of May. Now, this is entirely based on the available resources that they have, and it also allows for things like staff sickness, isolation in the future as well. And they're currently checking those plans and resources against the guidance that's been issued this week. As you can imagine, there's a lot of preparation work that goes into a new timetable being implemented, and a lot of that work has been happening over the last few weeks. As the guidance has only been released this week, we're having to check those plans and double-check those plans at the moment right now with staff representatives on social distancing, compliance and safety, and this might lead to some minor amendments to the timetables that were due to come in on the 18th. This enhanced service will be an expansion of the key worker timetable, and the message still remains the same at the moment right now, which is that people should use public transport as a last resort. But what we'll try to do is try to reintroduce some services on routes that have had bus substitutions until now during this. Guidance on social distancing is it states that it's supposed to be 2 meters where possible, and I think where possible is probably the key phrase here. If it's not possible, then at the moment right now what we're being told is that you should try to avoid face-to-face contact with other passengers, and operators are currently considering options at the moment right now to take seats out of use to try and facilitate this. But as you can imagine, this is a very difficult thing to do. RDG and DFT are also working on giving guidance at the moment right now, and a toolkit has gone out to operators, and that's looking at signage and materials that can be used consistently across sites. However, there'll be a long lead time with this to order, because there's a bit of a bottleneck given the volume of organisations at the moment right now who are trying to order materials. It's also a big task for operators like Northern, who have got 479 stations, but work is progressing on that. From yesterday, passengers were also encouraged to wear face coverings, but it's also, I think it's also important to mention that this is not mandatory. And dependent on the social distancing guidance, capacity will increase from 5% today to around about 10 to 25% of normal patronage. This is obviously this is a massive reduction on the normal capacity, and there is going to be a need to preserve this capacity for those people who need to make those journeys to work and back. We are actively trying to discourage people from using it for leisure, obviously aligning with PHE guidance. At this stage, we haven't seen a large uplift, but it's something that we are monitoring daily. LNER at the moment right now are going to be delivering a reservation-only service. Obviously, this could have a bigger impact on Northern and TP, and it's something that, again, that we are monitoring to see if there is going to be an impact on those operators. As TFN, we're going to continue to support through the North of England Contingency Group, adjusting industry response over the next coming days and weeks. We'll be monitoring things on the ground as well, with a focus on maintaining safety and the viability of rail as a travel option for essential travel where there's no alternative available. Open up for any questions. That brings an end to my update, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to start with a question that's coming on over the email, and then I will take questions. I can see Neil's wanting to ask one. And the question is around non-franchised trains, such as Hull trains in Grand Central. Can you give us any information on that at all, please, Therein?
The latest information at the moment right now is those services are currently suspended and staff are furloughed at the moment right now. I haven't received any information today at the moment to say when those services will restart again, but I'm happy to go and find out and provide an update after this.
Thank you very much, Salim. So the first question I have for you is for Neil, so please carry on, Neil.
Thanks, Paul. So the question, Salim, is can any proposed new fleet introduction be accelerated post-lockdown in anticipation of the possibly major increase in passenger usage after that? And also, do we know whether, albeit on the current limited service provision, whether Northern's reliability has improved at all during the key worker service provision?
I'll take the second question first. So I think when we've reviewed and monitored performance ever since COVID happened, what we've seen is that performance generally across the routes has improved dramatically. And I suppose the reason why it's improved dramatically is firstly because there's less trains on the network at the moment right now, which means that there's far more resilience on and far more resilience for the network to be able to soak up any delay. And secondly, because there's less people travelling at the moment right now, so that means that dwell times are far shorter than they normally would be. So from a performance point of view, we are seeing both Northern and TP are doing very, very well.
Good. So far, so good. Thanks.
So far, so good. In terms of new fleet introduction, I'd say At this stage, it's very difficult to say. These programs are very, very complicated. One thing that we'll have to be mindful of is what social distancing guidance remains in place for the immediate future as well as the medium-term future as well, because that will obviously impact on driver training going forward. Secondly, ramping up driver training can take quite a big amount of time, because there is things like union consultation that needs to take place. Drivers need to be given a certain amount of notice. So there is a complication. It is a complicated process to getting driver training started again. But having spoken to the operators, I know they are absolutely keen to get driver training started as soon as possible. And where possible, they'll try to use available paths that have been made available on the network, because less trains are running. To try and accelerate some elements of the driver training.
Okay, thanks for that. As long as that's borne in mind. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Martin Mitchell, please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I was very interested in what was being said there, particularly about social distancing on trains. I'm eager to avoid what's happened in London, both at the beginning of the COVID crisis and again on Monday, where people absolutely crammed like sardines into the tubes. And you're talking about facing the other way, and in case you cough, or sadly it's not like that. If I cough, I've got no complete control over where it's going to go. So I have to have every available safety mechanism in place. And would members agree with me that it's far, far better to have too many trains than not enough trains? And putting on more trains doesn't encourage people to go back to work. It's not a case of people see there's an extra train and think, yeah, I'll go back to work now. It doesn't work that way. It's far, far better to have greater capacity, possibly empty trains, rather than the other way round.
I wasn't sure. I think the question you're asking is about whether we can put more capacity on there. So I think the operator plans and the plan that is due to come in on the 18th of May basically will maximise the volume of trains that operators can reliably put on with the available resources that they have, with the assumption, obviously, that they need to factor in a certain element of staff, maybe off isolation reasons or for sickness as well. So 70% seems to be the perfect median in terms of the amount of trains that operators are able to provide reliably. I think in terms of what we've seen in London, there are some concerns, and others are isolated to certain areas. I think it's something that we'll monitor quite closely in the north of England. I mean, as an example, generally speaking, the average northern train is currently carrying lower, probably 10 or 11 people, to be honest with you. So at the moment, right now, we're not seeing a big issue around this, but it's something that we are going to monitor closely. All the operators are currently following RDG guidance, which will look at how they can try to facilitate social distancing as much as possible, whether that be removing seats from service, whether that may be taping them off, whether that may be removing face-to-face seats as well. And it's something that they're working on. I mean, the issue here is that the guidance has come out so late that they're just trying to interpret that and also order the right equipment required to be able to facilitate those changes on their rolling stock.
Thank you very much, Salim. Does that satisfy you, Martin?
Yeah, I'm satisfied up to date. My concern is that there's going to be another government announcement sometime, as there was on Sunday out of the blue, and a lot of people interpreted that as they had to get back to work on Monday, and then suddenly you see health and safety go out the window. That's what I'm eager to avoid.
Well, and I think Salim's pointed out that they are monitoring this. So thank you very much for that. I'd now like to ask Councillor Jones if you would like to ask his question.
Yes. Well, it was just straightforward. When Network Rail and the operators are looking at various plans, is it possible for members of the Scrutiny Committee to see those plans, even if I don't know whether they're confidential at this stage, but certainly on a confidential basis, it would help if we got an opportunity to comment.
So the plans for service uplift have been shared as part of the North of England contingency group with all the regions. So the representative and officers from all those regions have been consulted as part of this process as well. So I'm not really sure whether how that information is pushed through your relevant organisations. But all of the regions, we've tried to engage with them as much as possible through the North England contingency group, and we've had some fantastic valuable feedback as well from other regions in terms of how it's going to affect them, where we might need to make some tweaks as well. So we have tried to capture as much information as possible from the regions.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just make the point? They do get passed down eventually. What I'm asking is, can members of the Scrutiny Committee be sent the information?
Well, I take the question. I will take it away. But my gut instinct for reaction to this is that maybe as individual, I've got a note for myself, is that the office to find out who the officers are in the organisation that are responding to this, and asking them to copy me on their responses, and maybe that might be a way of doing this. I imagine that it's already quite a cumbersome process, and to put us in and also what would we have any impact in that in those plans. However, we'll take it away and we'll look at this. Councillor John Davison, I believe you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mine's really looking at when trains do start filling up. And the thing that's concerned me is the mixed message we have about face coverings, face masks. Obviously, the Germans have decided, and perhaps one or two other countries, that when you go on public transport, it's mandatory. And I think looking at the latest scientific evidence and studies about aerosol transmission simply from speaking and how long it remains in the air, is there anything we can do in the north? Because obviously the central government seems to be sending out a mixed message that if you want, recommending that you wear one, but if you don't want to wear one, you don't have to. I'd certainly, if I had to go on public transport, feel much more comfortable if all those around me were wearing some form of face covering to protect me, not particularly to protect the individual, but to protect other folk from me and me from other folk. So the question is really, can we lobby? Have we got any influence in the north?
I suppose I can answer a question from a TFN and operator point of view. So from my point of view, I think it's important that we follow the Public Health England guidance, and the operators are working very, very closely with RDG to make sure that there's a consistent approach across this. In terms of lobbying, it's not really my expertise around that, but as we said at this stage, we've only been told that it's a voluntary thing. It's not mandatory at this stage. It very much sits with the individual at this stage to decide whether they want to wear face coverings.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Steve. I appreciate it.
Just quickly, I noticed Neil's talked about masks. I mean, I think we're not just talking about masks. We're talking about any form of face covering, homemade or scarves. So understand the worries about robbing the NHS of actual physical surgical masks, but there are other options.
Okay, John, thanks.
All right. I also think that we should lobby through our own councils to get consistency on this. I fully agree with you that it's not strong enough. The guidance is it's guidance, and too many people are sort of thinking I'm young and invincible, and I'm 62 and not invincible, unfortunately, under this the way this virus works.
I must also say before we move on around this, by making it mandatory, it would also, if people didn't arrive at stations without face coverings, it would either mean that you'd have to stop those people getting onto trains, or you would have to provide them with face coverings before they got onto those trains, and that that does snowball into bigger things in terms of how do we dispose of those items and other logistical challenges around that, which at this stage RDG or the operators are probably not resourced to have a look at this stage.
Well, I think all these things need to be thought through. I think that's the big point. I'd like to invite Barry to continue with the presentation on the updates, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. I'll run through B, C, and D as one set, and just in this transition from what Sal was saying, Sal, thank you very much for the remarks you made, and the little background you had behind you as well. I just want to say a thank you both to the trading companies, to Northern and TransPennine, and to all their staff, and to Network Rail staff, who actually have shown huge flexibility and adaptability in what is a fast-moving situation. And I think really just saying a thank you to them is something I would like to personally put on the record today, because it is a changing situation when they're having, and with such a diverse network in the north, that some of these challenges are particularly keen in the north, given how widespread the network is. But I think we deserve our thanks for everything we're doing. So I'm going to run through quickly on the impact on TFN of coronavirus. So next slide, please, Maria. While some individual staff members and their families have had a very big direct impact from coronavirus, as an organisation, our absentee rate across the board due to coronavirus has really had a relatively small impact. So that individuals have had their own very significant impacts, but in terms of our organisation, compared to other organisations, the level of absenteeism as a result of coronavirus is relatively small, thankfully, and we are still carrying out some recruitment and doing that virtually. So as an organisation, we are continuing with all our programmes as we were before moving to remote working. And we're ready to move to the next slide. We have shut both our offices in Manchester and Leeds, and are really focusing on maintaining productivity of the team, but also looking at well-being and lots of support for staff, because some staff have adapted to working from home incredibly well. Clearly others need additional support for various reasons. Next slide, Maria. And again. Moving on to risks. I just want to look at these sort of in time frames in a way. So the short to medium term risks, I've talked about staff absence not affecting us yet in a big way, but of course it could in the future, potentially. Within our partners, we work with every local transport authority across the north. Some of them have been redirected onto coronavirus response locally, so actually officer reference groups and so on can be disrupted by this. National capacity, so things like the Williams Review is one example I would give. The Williams Review on rail, which was supposed to herald a new dawn on rail, was supposed to be published last autumn, then this spring, and at the moment there's really no clear view on when that might be published. And that is simply as a result of people rightly focusing their efforts on the need to respond to coronavirus. That national capacity is a risk. And I think within TFN and within partners, we all are looking to say, well, actually, what do we need to do to get the economy going again as further restrictions are relaxed and as the construction industry is back on its feet? Is there a way of bringing projects forward? I'll come on to the economic recovery plan in a little minute or two. So next slide, Maria. In the longer term, I think we really have to, and there's a bit of uncertainty about this, but the underlying point in this risk is the availability of future funding to invest in infrastructure in the long term, given that one estimate is that our national debt can rise by £300 billion as a result, and then the Office of Budget Responsibility say £250 billion higher debt than otherwise would have been the case. So we just know that's a reality. Not quite what that means for long-term funding and investment, nobody knows yet. And so we've highlighted some risks around that. Next slide, please, Maria. And also in the long term, and this is some follows on from what Sal was saying, even as measures for passengers return in small numbers to the railway, reinforcing what Sal was saying around public transport should only be used as a last resort for people travelling, because we do want to keep that capacity on the railway for those that really are travelling for essential reasons only. But the long-term impact on the economics and commercial reality for railway, and given the culture shift that is happening with people working from home better, and actually many people, Twitter is one company has already announced that they'll be offering all staff the right to continue to work from home full-time. So what will this mean for the future rail services as people change how they might work? Now actually much of that could be a good thing for the environment of people are travelling less overall. No journey is the greenest journey of all. So from that point of view, there is a risk. If people do change their pattern of travel, I think that could be a benefit as well. So next slide. Just moving on quickly to the economic recovery plan. I've sort of touched upon already the current position in terms of extra borrowing the government's having to undertake, the shrinkage in the economy, current low volumes, and the future change in travel as well. So next slide. So what we expect might happen, and we don't know that it definitely will happen, but is that one of the government responses, an option for a government response, is to launch some sort of fiscal stimulus, which quite often can include investment in infrastructure as part of that. And therefore we are very quickly working through our investment programme, looking at those projects where business cases are reasonably well advanced to see what we can bring forward and propose to government as part of an economic recovery plan. Next slide, please. So we've reallocated internal resource and we have engaged with all our partners, and we're looking to present an initial view to the TFN board in June on where we are with that, and then finalise that in July. But actually at the same time looking to see what timing DAFT and Treasury are working to and bring that work forward if necessary. But we will be working through to make sure what we're saying is absolutely rigorous in terms of ensuring stuff can be made shovel-ready quickly and how. But we also want to be really clear that there's, part of the travel picture is things like, can we get better broadband, and should the government be investing in better broadband in those areas where the market won't serve very well? So these are outside the bigger towns and cities, more in the rural areas, the smaller towns and villages. How do we get really good broadband into those areas so that actually in the future those people can choose not to travel and work from home sometimes as well? I think that's an important part of the travel mix in terms of taking demand off the system as well. Next slide, please. So that's a very quick run through, Chair. I'm just very happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry. So anybody got questions for Barry at all? I've got one while I'm just waiting for things to come into the chat. One of the things that the government is doing, Barry, is they're very much promoting active travel and reallocation of road space, potentially, in some of the more urban centres. If I want to get on a bike, or take my bike from Manchester to, say, Liverpool or Manchester to Leeds, do we need to start thinking in future about space for people to take their chariots with them on the train, their bikes, that is?
So, Paul, first of all, the promotion of active travel is a very big part of that economic recovery plan as well. I think a lot of active travel schemes could be quick wins in terms of getting investment quite quickly, because they tend to be smaller in nature and able to progress more quickly. So we absolutely believe, as part of an economic stimulus package, that active travel should be a big part of that to help promote the ability for people. Actually, a lot of people have started walking and cycling more at the moment, which is great in that sense. And I heard Chris Boardman, the cycling commissioner from Greater Manchester, on the radio saying, we're putting in place at the moment in Manchester, is what he was saying, lots of temporary schemes, and actually we'll ask, we'll put those schemes, see how they work. And I think that's exactly the right thing to do things quickly at the moment. capacity is a very valuable storage or indeed cycle. That's fine. It looks like comprehensive. No question. Sorry, Fish has a question. Would you like to?
Yeah, it's good. It took me a while to get in. You might have alluded to it now, but I mean, every franchise on the railways is going to be unsustainable on its original terms. Are we expecting franchisees to renegotiate or just hand franchises back?
That's a question, I think, Steve, it's a very valid question, and you know, I have, in effect, in my presentation, talked about the future commercial picture looking quite bleak for franchises because passenger numbers will remain low for some time. I don't think anybody has the answer to that question yet because it is quite complex in terms of procurement rules and everything else. At the moment, TransPennine is on an emergency measure agreement, which means it's having basically its costs paid to keep the services running, and Northern is in a very similar arrangement, but it was already under the operator of last resort, in effect underwritten run by the government anyway. So from that point of view, I think there's a very big question yet to be answered in that, but undoubtedly the economics of bus operation, the economics of rail operation, the economics of light rail operation are all going to be very challenged by having lower passenger numbers for some time to come. Okay, thank you. I'm already in touch. Well, I tried to get in touch with the chief exec of the new company, the TAOR, about my 3 trains an hour at Warrington West. But first meeting, I don't think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parish. Councillor Salter has a question for you, and then hopefully we can get to item 5.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to ask, I was particularly interested in recovery suggestion still maybe to the north. However, there has been concern the investment for the north has that may bring out areas edges of the and I think on some points there has understandably been a focus on investing in and around Manchester, but there has been a concern that other areas are left out. So would it necessarily be appropriate to use the work that we've done as it is, as a kind of roadmap in some situation where we were looking at economic recovery, or would there be any sort of attempt to tailor our approach as facts develop and as we look at which areas may need support economically?
So I would disagree with the question slightly. So I don't think we are concentrating on any one area at all. So the long-term investment programme covers all of the north, and every local transport authority, including Lancashire, have been fully involved in making sure the relevant projects are in that long-term investment programme. And what we aren't doing though is actually, lots of other local projects that people will be rightly seeking funding in their own right for, but on the strategic road network, major road network, large local majors in terms of roads, and on the rail network, we are looking right across the north for projects that can be brought forward. Some of those may be in the cities, but many will be in rural areas and many will be in the counties and across the north. So from that point of view, I would say we are actually very much representing that need to invest in all of the north.
Well, I do understand what you're saying. I don't think that is quite been the feeling of the scrutiny committees in the concerns about maybe. I respond.
Okay. Matthew, also that's a corona for asking to wind the section. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Two things to this is that I get I was but if masks were to become mandatory, then there needs to be a consistent approach to this, of which Serene's picked out some critical things. The other thing is relating to network rail and operator plans, and maybe one of the things that we can all do is actually go and find out who it is within our own councils that the North of England contingency group are liaising with, and perhaps we can tap into that information that way and find out what information is actually coming back from our own councils. So those are the two things that I've taken away from this, as well as complete and thorough update. So I would like to say thank you very much to Serene and Barry, and I believe your sponsors have given us certainly given me confidence that we are doing our best in the North to manage this this continually changing situation. So thank you very much. I'd now like to invite Lucy, who's presenting on the freight and logistic update.
Thank you very much, Chair. I may have circulated the report, so I hope you've all read it, but I will give you a verbal summary of what that report contained, and then if people have got questions, then I'm happy to take questions after my summary. So the first part of the report reminded the committee about how we've integrated the enhanced freight and logistics analysis into our key programmes as part of the strategic outline business case for MPR, into the strategic transport plan, and then also the economic value of freights within the North. A key part of our integrated rail plan activity that Barry and I think the committee will hear a bit more detail about later, there'll be a detailed section on freight within our further work, which means that we'll be able to sort of add increased value about the freight network as well as passenger needs on the network. We've prepared analytical exciting in modelling asked you an assumption heavy goods and the network in a start, whether it was peak, and we're looking at one of the examples is how those behave. So you a lot of driver breaks at peak time because they don't want that in traffic jams. They're tacking by, and that doesn't really work for heavy goods vehicle drivers. So they often have breaks at peak times so they can maximise the driving time on the network. Now, the models don't reflect that, but now they are going to in the work that TfN are doing, and that's really groundbreaking and quite complicated, but we are working together. The DFT like the idea of having this extra part of the analysis, and it's a really groundbreaking and forward-thinking part of the work TfN are doing. And then looking ahead, there'll be significant freight considerations in the investment programme work that as we look to quantitatively analyse the impact of the investment programme, and then I will continue, as will TfN, to try and secure investment following the COVID-19 sort of outcome, and as we return to normality, I will continue to lobby for and campaign for additional investment into the rail network and the road network for additional freight capacity. So can I hand back to you, Chair? And then
Lucy, thank you very much for that. One is a very good paper, and two, the fact that I think freight is going to be a major part of anything that we do with transport from the north. I do have a few questions, but let's see who's myself. But there are some questions coming up. So perhaps Neil, perhaps you have the first question here.
Yes, Chair. It was the proposal for a charter. But he's already developing a charter. I wasn't quite clear about this. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that.
I'm not sure there's a paragraph 3.7, so missing.
Yeah. Definitely. Yes. The passes and then work on.
That is.
I think the report than the one that I stopped at 6.
I picked up the 5. This is what I tried to explain my confusion earlier. That was I'll come to that presently.
Okay, thank you very much. So can I move on to Councillor Parish? You have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Lucy,
Yes.
Having done time on the railways, it might just be me, but is there a sort of list or map of the routes that can't take the bigger containers? Because it just says some bridges in parts of the network, which sounds rather vague.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I just piggyback a question on the back of this? Steve's picked up something. I think your report would be better if you'd actually detailed how many bridges, etc., and how many stretches of railway, so that we actually we can quantify this and we can say, well, actually, it's 3 bridges. It's not a big problem. If it's 300 bridges out of 310 bridges, it's a big problem. We have no idea of gauging. It's too, as Steve says, it's vague, and I would actually would like to have detail on this, number of bridges, number of lengths of railway that can't deal with this, if I may. So back to you, Lucy.
So, Chair, can you just say, of course, because Network Rail, everything has to be future-proof electrification as well. So it's not just bigger containers, it's wiring for wires under tunnels and all sorts.
Yeah, there's a significant amount of work, especially on transfer line connectivity going on now, and there's a further piece of work going to be commenced in the autumn. In terms of what I've referenced in the report, I can, I can.
It isn't.
No TF conducting study in the North of England. Entirety we have a strategy on freight, because I know it's very complicated. I know every area of the North of England has a slightly different take on it, but I just wondered if Lucy wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. I was aware that TFGM are working on a freight route study. There's been work done by Network Rail, and they've consulted heavily on, within the industry, on their freight routings of the forecast growth of freight on the network. And they worked very closely with MDS Transmodal on that particular piece of work. And then there'll be another piece of strategic planning activity that is looking at transfer line connectivity for freight, and that is going to commence in the autumn, subject to the work programming due to the COVID activity. So, I mean, I'm quite encouraged by that, because that will give that for the first time will consider TransPennine freight in the round, and it will look at all the different the routes and the potential for investment in those routes to release capacity and also enable freight to travel across the Pennines, which is one of the major things we've highlighted within the STP and also the enhanced analysis.
Thank you, Lucy. Is that okay with you, Councillor Jones?
Yeah, no, good answer, thank you.
Okay, I'll move on to Councillor Rod Fletcher, please.
Hi, afternoon everyone, thank you.
Hello.
Hi, hello. I was very pleased to see this report. I really was pleased to see it. And one point in the report, you say that the railways are too narrow. In actual fact, we don't just need extra width, we need extra... That's
yeah.
There's forms as well. So very pleased with it. I've also got a diagram which the previous the containers and put on the one route because it was blocked. This is very important. Please move as you can, and also, of course, using east-west for all traffic coming in by sea, east and west. It's going to take an awful lot of lorries off the road and help with reducing our carbon. So please, please, we're really pleased. And just one question as well. Have we requested to reopen the line between Hadfield and Penistone? I know the government are looking at reopening lines. I can't recall seeing that anywhere in any recent meetings, but possibly I've missed it. But that's a question that someone could possibly answer, because that would be a very quick win, reopening between Hadfield and Penistone, because of course Great Central Route was built to much more generous specifications, and the Woodhead Tunnel is fairly new compared with other tunnels. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rod. Lucy, you may or may not know whether the Hadfield and Penistone line is reopening. We won't hold you to that, and if you could perhaps take it away and get someone to get the answer to the group, that would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
I now have a question from Neil Hughes. I'd like Neil to ask his question, but then before you answer it, Lucy, I'd also like to, I have a question that relates to this, so I would like to be able to do that. So if you'd like to go ahead, Neil, that would be great.
Yeah, well, thanks, Paul. I had a couple of questions, actually. I'll perhaps give them both at the same time. The first one was whether, to her knowledge, the road freight transport industry is also fully on board with decarbonisation. And then the second question is about the gauge clearing referred to. I think I've got the right report this time. And is this a national issue, or is this really more significant in the north? Thanks.
Okay,
Lucy, just before you get going, I'd like to put mine in, then you can answer them both at the same time. So under section 3.2 of your report, Importance of Freight to the North Economy, I would suggest that you perhaps add a 3.2a or something else. I think that you understate, where you talk about reducing carbon emissions and improving air quality is now imperative. I actually think that you could rephrase this, have a separate heading which says, this is how we're going to contribute to the government's zero carbon plan, something along those lines, and that we're looking to decarbonise transport, perhaps from the around rail. So I think so. Comment. The other comment. So now, so I'll ask my question to gauge you. Because I think he asked a national problem. In 3.3, you talk about an integrated rail plan. And I feel it's what you talk about Midlands and the North, and I am just concerned that we perhaps, we should be thinking about Northern Ireland and Wales. What is the amount of freight that goes through Anglesey to Northern Ireland? So therefore, I think it's more of a national problem. And I think if you thought about what went through Holyhead, Stranraer, and Fishguard, so I think they're all. So I think that needs broadening out. But I'll leave all the questions. I'll leave my questions and Neil's questions to your friend Mercy's.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much. Right, so in terms of the road freight decarbonisation element, as far as I know, the road freight industry is both, but it's challenging issue, isn't it, for decarbonisation? We all want to see the decarbonisation, sort of net zero by the times we've all identified, and we are working closely with the Road Haulage Association, with the Freight Transport Association to gauge the opinion of the sector. There are different sort of areas of activity. You can look at different fuelling, you can look at platooning, you can look at and you can look at modal shifts, so putting more containers onto the railway. So there's a whole host of different areas of activity to focus on. So I think the Road Haulage Association is both challenged by, as we all are, by the agenda, but they are working towards finding different solutions. In terms of gauging, the gauge question, it is of course a national issue. My focus naturally is on the north, as it's my job, but then it isn't completely a national issue. If you're moving containers from the southern ports through the north into Scotland, then you need to make sure you can do that. So it is a national issue. There is a Network Rail have different groups. I sit on national freight groups that talk about investment into the railway on behalf of the freight industry. So we do focus on that as an issue. In terms of the integrated rail plan, you're right. It's when we're talking about if you're looking at the rail franchises, you naturally focus on Northern and Transpennine. It's to access into it's got an entire from my officers who've the north of England, off the north to working with for other economic transport, and then and job does cover bigger geography as well because of the considerations for those boundary issues.
Okay.
And then,
can I just come back on the road decarbonisation, Lucy? Is there any evidence that the RTA is actively encouraging its members to switch its vehicles to more environmentally friendly makes? Thanks.
I can follow that up with the Freight Transport Association. I mean, they are there to lobby on behalf of their members. So it depends on because people pay a membership fee into the Freight Transport Association, and then they act on behalf of their members. So that's quite a nuanced question, but I can come back to you on that and either provide you with the contact or answer that question directly.
I'm sure we'll all be interested in that.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Now can I turn to hang on a second. To Andrew Cooper, please.
Hi, Lucy. Thanks for the report.
Hello.
I just you might have covered this with some terminology that I don't know. I think it might be covered by platooning of freight. But what I wanted to ask was whether when you're looking at your road modelling, you were taking into account likely autonomous vehicles, the fact that HGVs will be able to drive much closer together at a consistent speed, and whether that's taken I'll need rail capacity.
Is that it's of the use. Sorry, that so positive fuel usage. You kind of need no sense of testing efficacy of the safety. So you need a human intervention. The challenge is you need human intervention in each vehicle, or can you do that across the platoon? So that's what that is. So I think you're right, because that's what you described. And what was just remind me of the question again?
Yeah, I was just asking whether what assessment we'd made as to what impact that.
Whether it's in the modelling.
Whether
it's in the modelling. Yeah,
past the modelling.
So at the moment I can't answer that directly because I'd need to speak to the analytical team about how, because we look to 2050, what our assumptions on autonomous vehicles and how that influences the future scenarios. I know it's part of the future scenarios work that we're doing, which looks at different sort of world views about how the North and the rest of the world develops. But I'll double check with the analytical team. I don't think it is included, but I will double check for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Councillor Davison, I believe you have a question.
There's a lot of questions.
As we're running few projects, we've had, especially trying to make room for one. Of course, the majority haul and the freight likely to remain the case. So obviously, is to try and convert to see that they're putting facilities into Ellesmere Port, and obviously a vision network. The question really is that given that, especially with the current economic climate, the funding for all of this wonderful stuff is going to be quite questionable. Gauge enhancement to a lot of areas does not need to be electrified, and therefore, are we considering, primary routes that need to be electrified for passenger reasons, and what we can do to get, say, the big boxes out of Birmingham, where it doesn't require that extra gauging height? Cheers.
Okay, thank you. So, I know that successfully the Humber ports, the South Humber ports have got their gauge clearance onto the East Coast Main Line through from Birmingham onto the East Coast Main Line, which is fantastic. In terms of traction decarbonisation, so there's a piece of work being done by Network Rail that's looking at the decarbonisation of freight as well as the decarbonisation of passenger transport. So, in terms of what the sort of initial findings are from that piece of work, when you're talking about the larger trains, the container trains, the only show in town really for that is to decarbonise that element of the freight industry is electrification. So therefore, as part of the decarbonisation work that the Network Rail are doing, they're looking at how to electrify and which parts of the network to electrify first, and what sequence of activity will follow. So they're working with the industry to look at what units they have, how that would work to become zero carbon, and they're putting to ministers their recommendations on how that would actually work. So there's a piece of my chair is in terms of company, it's there to make sure that the needs targets for so also be working with companies to make for the North, for the rest.
Thank you. You okay with that?
Yes,
Yes, indeed. I think if it's left to Network Rail, we'll be talking about this in 20 years' time. But there you go. That's me being cynical. Even at the best of times, they take donkey's years to get to the end.
Okay. So, and unfortunately, we are getting a bit behind. So, Lucy, for the sake of expediency, I'm going to relay the questions that are in the box to you, and then I think we should close it off so that you're allowed to relax. So, the questions that I've got here are, and they're basically all to do with, well, obviously freight. That's what your report's on. But Sean Chase has been asking about the freight and Humber ports, which I think you've already mentioned about the clearance there, and those bringing goods to the north. Steve Parrish has also contributed here about the fact that the routing through Manchester, this is train freight. I'm not sure whether train freight is your speciality. Rod has just mentioned that the stuff, and Ashley has asked about Teesside and its ambition to grow seriously. So, and asking about the network as far as getting to Teesside. So, if you could take those questions as sort of one and give us a brief overview, that'd be perfect. Thanks.
Right. So, in terms of the Humber ports, I'm aware that there are some of the ferry services and the ferry operators that operate in and around the Humber and other ports in the north they're looking at buying, they are buying larger ferries which can bring increased capacity for people on freight. Because so moment it's the on the route, it's the train operator. People take different routes and to make sure they're not using the past, but we have no diction that. I am aware about the Nuneaton to Felixstowe project, and I know it's still not cleared, and that is part of some of the activity that I'm involved in with Network Rail. They discuss the southern issues as well as northern, and then about the free ports in Teesside. Has the freight network to Teesside been taken into account? And yet we will be. It is an important part of the network as the rest of the network is, we talk about the access to Teesport in the enhanced analysis, and it will be included in the work that we do for the integrated rail plan. But also the considerations around Teesport are going to be will form part of the Network Rail piece of work about the Trans-Pennine connectivity. So it would be looking at connectivity to warehousing clusters, but also the ports as well. Thank you. I think I've tried to rattle through that.
Thank you very much for one, presenting a very good report, and two, for the grilling and the testing that you've got. So thank you for that. I'm just going to briefly summarise. We seem to have talked about I suppose obstacles on the rail, such as bridges, height gauge, height related to electrification. So we've got a number of issues there. Significant concern about the decarbonisation of road freight in particular.
Yep.
The need to integrate, and that you will actually integrate more outside of the north than perhaps some of your colleagues. But you've got to think about the future and autonomous vehicles and how that can help capacity going forward. So I think you've given us a fantastic overview.
Thank you. The detail about modelling, including issues.
I believe we operate.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very good. Take this reporting. It's there. I think one of the things noted about it is the kind of the last echo of the old world. Obviously, most of the period that it covers was, or just over half actually, the period it covers was pre-lockdown, and then subsequent to that, it was responding to the new environment. There's quite a lot of detail in there. It was presented to the TFN consultative board that we had on the 29th of April, on the same basis, which was it was there for people to read and to know and to ask questions about, but not to formally present on, because there's just a lot of it, and most of it's probably not worth taking people through in detail. But I'm very happy to take any questions that people might have.
So any questions for Ian, please? I don't appear to have any questions for you, Ian. I think I suspect most people have read the report, but hang on a minute.
Yeah, I'm just submitting one.
Okay, John. Fire away.
Oh, well, just to say thanks for the report. I mean, obviously, an awful lot of bets are off at the moment. You've done as good a job as you can of trying to see what on earth the financial position is going to be when we come out of lockdown, and how we're going to deal with the huge national debt, what that means, and obviously it paints a bit of a grim picture, but all we can be is optimistic. But you know, I think that's probably why you're not getting too many comments, really, because it's like us, you're probably wondering what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have undertaken a impact review on the programmes, principally looking at that in terms of is this going to have a cost impact? Is it going to have a timing impact? I think some of the issues you're very rightly referring to, John, are slightly longer term, but the next monthly operating report will have a summary of the impacts on programmes in the shorter term. Now, as Barry mentioned earlier, we've not been particularly impacted. There have been a couple of people who've had to take time off to look after others who've got suspected COVID-19, but we've not been particularly heavily impacted at this time. What it has done is it's thrown a lot of grit into the system. You know, it's not necessarily broken the machine, but it's just introduced a load of sand into it, which probably isn't very helpful in either the shorter or the longer term, and that's what's resulted in some of the programmes being pushed back slightly. I think NPR being the most obvious example, but we just need to keep an eye on that. You know, we are fortunate, I think, in that a lot of what we can do can be done remotely, without at least in the short to medium term too big a decline in the efficiency with which we can do it. So yeah, there will be an update in the next monthly operating report that just gives a bit more detail about that. I'm just looking at the comments down the side, Chair. The one about acronyms is a constant bugbear of mine. I do try to make sure that we describe what is meant by these acronyms whilst the report is being reviewed, but they're still slipping through. GDS is Government Digital Service, PVALs is Platform Validators, OBT is Operating Board Team, and RMAP is Old Model. Sure that acronyms will
Okay, we've got two clips for you. Question.
Thank you. Chair. Ian, could you just get a bit more into the bullet on page 5 around the infrastructure? It mentions mitigations are kind of being developed, in particular the Leeds Newcastle element of that, please. Thank you.
Is that, just let me get that up in the report. Is Sal still on the line? Oh no, this is NPR, sorry.
Yeah, Michael, can we take that question away, please, and get something?
I'll get somebody on the team to circulate a response to that and just put a bit more flesh on the bones there.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
All right, thank you, Michael. What's going on? Okay, Councillor Salter has a quick question.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, something which obviously has been mentioned a few times is that we are perhaps as a country moving into a much more challenging financial situation, at least in the short, possibly medium term. I don't know how much you can say about this, but has there been any change of tone in the Department of Transport? Or do we feel confident that they remain as supportive as they have been in investing in the North, given the financial changing financial background?
I don't think there's been anything specific. There has been an ongoing, and this is in the longer term, discussion around, well, there's now more STBs and therefore the money that we give to STBs need to be shared out between a greater number of organisations. I think our response to that has always been quite forceful, which is there are lots of STBs now, but none of them have got statutory responsibilities apart from this one, and those statutory responsibilities need to be properly funded. Certainly, we have made the point and continue to make the point that the funding envelope that we are working within, which is £10 million, I think there's probably two things worth noting about that. One was that when the department and government granted us or allocated that money, it was assumed we would be able to recover VAT, and we can't. So that essentially becomes a £9 million budget rather than a £10 million budget. The other point to make is that is in 2015 money, and it hasn't been increased since. And the impact of those two things mean that going into the next spending cycle, even if our budget remains the same, we will have effectively taken something along the lines of a 20% cut in the amount that was originally intended in 2015. That's not to say that the department won't try and push back. I think if there is a tonal point, it is more along the lines of the general, and anybody who, and you guys will all be familiar with the central government line, which is there's no money. We're in very straitened circumstances. There may have to be cuts all round, but it hasn't gone, certainly as far as anything anybody said to me, it hasn't gone beyond that at this point. There are some issues that we've had in terms of resolving the funding for NPR, which were raised, which have been raised in the consultative board with the members. We're in the process of working those through. Some of those, I think, are driven by uncertainties in rail generally caused by COVID-19, and the fact that there is going to be an integrated rail plan and exactly how that fits with NPR. So again, I think that is at least as much an issue of uncertainty at the department's end as anything else. But we are in the process of getting those funding agreements resolved. So I'm not sure that quite answers your question, but I guess I think that's probably what I'm seeing from where I'm sitting.
So Ian, I'd like to thank you for that answer, because I think you were asked a very difficult question, and one that's probably what I would have said was above my pay grade. However, So look, we've got two questions in the box, and I'm going to close it off after these two questions. So could I ask Councillor Jones if he could ask his question, please?
Ian, the two questions I had was, just quickly, one was about the Atherton line, where I don't know whether you remember Chris Grayling when he was Secretary of State for Transport. Well, he arrived in Manchester about 18 months ago and said, the Atherton line is perfect for tram train. And everybody keeps asking us, what's happened to that comment? Admittedly, he's no longer Secretary of State for Transport, of course, but if you can't do it today, do you think you could just see if there's any progress on that matter? And the second issue, you mentioned the Manchester Northwest Quadrant study, and you mentioned in it the A57 M62 link, which is one of the proposals.
Yeah.
Well, no mention of the A57 to M60 link, which was again supposed to be part of the proposals. And I just wondered, when will the DFT be telling us what they agree with, if you like, the Northwest Quadrant study timetable be agreed?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure, because the time scales on quite a lot of things at the moment are now just gone up in the air. What I will do is I will get somebody in our roads team to pull together an up-to-date position on that, and then provide that back to the committee.
Thank you very much. So we just have one last question from Neil, which seems to be relates to page 16 and refers to TRU OBC going to IPDC at the end of April. Did this happen?
I understand that it did. Just give me one moment, because I'm going to just let me get to the page 16. You said.
Yes, top of page 16.
Yes, my understanding is that did go.
Do we have any outcome from that?
There is a. My understanding is that is proceeding, and it's interesting, because I yesterday evening did a review of April's monthly operating report, and I actually raised a query with the team, because the wording that was in the draft, I didn't quite understand what it intended. So I think it has been given the okay to proceed with caveats, and I just want to get to the bottom of what those are. That's something else. That's going to be in next month's operating report.
All right, and Chair, just while I'm unmuted, can I just point out that on the bottom of page 28, the long-term rail strategy is said to now be subsumed into the STP in the column on the right. So I'm not sure why that's still featuring as an independent item on the in the performance indicators here.
Yeah, I think that was. There are a couple of these performance indicators which I think needed. They probably described things in different ways, which probably should never have been there in the first place, and I think that is one of them.
Okay, so there can be some tidying up there then before.
Yeah, well, this is the last time these particular KPIs will be reported, because this is obviously the last report from the previous financial year.
Yeah.
As of next month, it will be the new KPIs that were agreed.
That's fabulous. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.
Ian, thank you very much for that presentation. I'd like now to move us on, and we're at a situation where this is about exclusion of the press and public. So I know Gary will be taking notes, so and judge me if I do this wrong, but we now need to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during considerations of items 8, 9 and 10 on the grounds that, one, it is likely in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings that if members of the public will present during such items confidential information as defined in Section 100A bracket 2 of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended will be disclosed to them in breach of the obligation of confidence, and or 2, it or they may involve the likely disclosure of except information as set out in the paragraphs listed below of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is that correct, Gary? Do I need to get someone to propose and second this?
I move it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I now need to ask Kevin, I believe it is, who is broadcasting this particular committee meeting today, to please switch us off the internet and to confirm back that that has been done before I proceed to the next stage.